The last person to see the Henderson family alive was Pastor William Cross, who shook Mark's hand at the church door and wished them a Merry Christmas. 20 minutes later, when Linda Henderson's sister arrived at their house for the traditional Christmas Eve dinner, she found an empty home with the front door unlocked and no sign of the family. Mark, Linda, and their 7-year-old twin daughters, Emma and Grace, had vanished into the December night. What investigators discovered in 2024, hidden beneath St. Matthew's Church for over 4 decades, would reveal that some Christmas miracles are actually nightmares in disguise. December 24th, 1983, Cedar Falls, Iowa. Snow fell gently on the small Midwest town, Christmas decorations glowing warm yellow light through windows, bringing joy to anyone who passed by. The Henderson family sat in their usual seats at St. Matthew's Church that evening, third row from the front during the evening service. Mark Henderson was 35 years old, working at a local insurance agency. Tall with brown hair and an ever-present smile, everyone in town knew and trusted him. He conducted his insurance business with honesty, always trying to provide the best service to his clients. His wife, Linda, was 32, an elementary school teacher and one of the town's most beloved educators. Blonde-haired and blue-eyed, Linda had a special connection with children. Her students called her Ms. Linda instead of Mrs. Henderson. Their twin daughters, Emma and Grace, were 7 years old, looking identical but with completely different personalities. Emma was quiet, bookish, and imaginative, constantly drawing pictures and writing stories. Grace was talkative, athletic, and adventurous, loving soccer, tree climbing, and bicycle riding. The family had lived in Cedar Falls for 4 generations. Mark's great-grandfather was one of the town's founders in the 1880s, opening the first shop on Main Street. The Hendersons were a respected and beloved part of the community, and no one could imagine anyone targeting them. That Christmas Eve evening, St. Matthew's Church was packed beyond capacity. All 200 seats were filled, with people standing in side corridors in the back section. Pastor William Cross had served this church for 20 years, with the congregation viewing him as a family patriarch and trusting him unconditionally. At 45 years old, 6 feet tall with silver hair, Cross was known for his powerful and mesmerizing voice. When he spoke, he looked directly into people's eyes, making them feel as if he was speaking directly to their souls. Cross had come to Cedar Falls in 1963 as a young seminarian. At that time, the church was old and run down, with congregation numbers barely exceeding 50 people. Under Cross's leadership, the church had grown, modernized, and become the center of the community. That evening, he delivered his sermon titled Light of Hope, speaking about Christmas's miraculous power to bring families together. Tonight, he said, we are fortunate to be with our families, but let us not forget that some families are broken. Let us pray for them, embrace them. No one could know how ironic these words would become in such a short time. The Henderson family listened attentively throughout the sermon. Mark and Linda sat in the front row so they could hear every word Cross spoke. Emma and Grace whispered between themselves, occasionally saying something in their mother's ear. "Will Santa come tonight?" Grace had asked. Linda smiled and said, "Yes, sweetheart, but first we need to be home." Neighbor Jean Walsh, who overheard this conversation, later told police this detail, leading to a theory that the Henderson family might have rushed to get home to see their house. But this theory, like others, led nowhere. When the service ended at 9 p.m., the congregation began filing out. Cedar Falls was having a cold winter night, with the thermometer showing 10 degrees below zero. People quickly headed to their vehicles. The Henderson family, like others, said farewell to the pastor. Cross shook Mark's hand with both of his, as always, saying, "I wish you and your wonderful family a blessed Christmas." Linda smiled back. "You too, Pastor. We expect you for dinner tomorrow evening. I'll be cooking Linda's famous turkey." Emma and Grace hugged the pastor, saying, "Merry Christmas, Pastor Cross." Cross kissed the children goodbye. This was the last time the family was seen. The Henderson family had arrived at church in their blue 1979 Ford LTD, parked in their customary spot in the church parking lot. That evening, there were 45 cars in the lot. When the service ended, the car was still there, but no one had seen them walking toward their vehicle. Church dismissal was always crowded and chaotic. People gathered in groups chatting, children played at the edge of the snow, everyone shared Christmas wishes. When Jean Walsh told her family that the Hendersons' car remained in the parking lot, her husband Robert said, "Maybe someone gave them a ride home." This seemed logical. The Hendersons had hundreds of friends in Cedar Falls. Someone could have offered to drive them home. However, later investigation showed that no one had made such an offer to them. At 9:20 p.m., Linda's sister Margaret Thompson arrived at the Henderson home with her husband Robert and 10-year-old son David. This traditional Christmas Eve dinner was one of the Henderson family's most cherished family activities. Linda would prepare for weeks turkey, potato salad, green bean casserole, cornbread, and her famous apple pie. Margaret's mouth watered in anticipation. When they approached the front door and found it unlocked, they weren't initially surprised. The Hendersons might have left the door open for their guests, but when they entered and heard no sounds, they found it strange. "Linda! Mark! We're here!" Margaret called out. Her voice echoed but received no response. There was no one in the house. When they went to the kitchen, they found the turkey fully cooked in the oven, but cooled. Linda's notebook contained a to-do list for the evening meal. Everything had been completed. The table was set with cutlery for 6 people, the Henderson family, plus the Thompson family. In the living room, the Christmas tree lights were on, colorful packages arranged underneath. Emma and Grace's toys were scattered around the living room. A half-finished puzzle, coloring books, dolls, everything looked normal, as if the family had just stepped out a minute ago. But where could they have gone? There were no signs of struggle or forced entry anywhere. Windows were closed, back door locked. Mark's wallet was on the dresser, Linda's purse on the kitchen counter. Nothing was missing. Margaret panicked. Linda was always punctual, especially for family meals, never allowing delays. The Hendersons were known as the most reliable family in Cedar Falls. Margaret immediately tried calling Linda, but although the house phone rang, no one answered. Cell phones weren't common in that era. People used house phones. Robert saw his wife beginning to lose her composure. "Maybe they're at the neighbors," he said, calling the Walsh family. The Walsh family also said they hadn't seen the Hendersons, the Church family, the Morrison family, other neighbors. No one had seen them. Margaret's worry turned to panic. "This isn't normal at all, Robert." "Linda would never do this. Something's wrong." Robert Thompson had served for years in the Cedar Falls Volunteer Fire Department, well familiar with emergency situations. The Henderson disappearance wasn't normal at all. Mark never took unplanned time off work. Linda had promised her students she'd bring them gifts after Christmas. Emma and Grace were eagerly awaiting Christmas morning. None of them would leave their home voluntarily. Robert called the Cedar Falls Police Department at 11:45 p.m. Cedar Falls had a population of 7,500, with serious crimes limited to 1 or 2 cases per year. The police department consisted of 5 officers, 1 detective, and Police Chief Dan Morrison. Morrison had been in law enforcement for 30 years, taking pride in serving his community. But he had never encountered such a case before. An entire family disappearing completely, especially the Henderson family, such a well-known and beloved family, was unprecedented in the town's history. Morrison immediately took action. He assembled his entire team, requested support from nearby towns, and notified the Iowa State Police. The first 24 hours were critical. Morrison declared the Henderson home a crime scene. Forensic specialists searched the house for fingerprints, DNA samples, signs of struggle. They found nothing. The house was clean, orderly, and normal. No signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle. It was as if the family had left voluntarily. But where? On the second day, the Henderson bank accounts were checked. No money had been withdrawn. Credit cards hadn't been used. On the third day, the FBI became involved. Special Agent Patricia Williams came from Des Moines. Federal resources were mobilized. The Henderson family was officially classified as endangered persons. St. Matthew's Church was examined in detail. FBI technicians turned the church upside down, scanning every corner. Pastor Cross provided full cooperation, sharing everything he knew about the Henderson family. They were a perfect family, Cross said. Mark was an honest businessman. Linda was a wonderful teacher. The girls were like angels. I can't imagine anyone wanting to harm them. Cross's story was consistent and never changed. He had no idea where the Henderson family might have gone after leaving the church. A town-wide search operation began. All of Cedar Falls police, firefighters, volunteers, even nearby farmers joined the search. Every inch of Black Hawk County soil was scanned. Forest areas, abandoned buildings, old farms, streams, ponds. No trace of the Henderson family was found. Media covered the case extensively. All television channels and radio stations in Iowa reported the story. Associated Press distributed the story nationally. People magazine made it a cover story. Christmas Eve. Mystery. Where are the Hendersons? Days turned into weeks. Tips began pouring in. The Henderson family had been spotted at a gas station in Texas. A motel owner in California recognized them. They appeared at a shopping center in Colorado. The FBI followed every tip, checked every lead. None proved true. The Henderson family seemed to have been erased from the world. Winter turned to spring. 1984 arrived. The Henderson case was still Cedar Falls' main topic, but media attention began to wane. New incidents, new stories overshadowed the Hendersons. Although the FBI continued active investigation, hopes were diminishing. Police Chief Morrison couldn't sleep at night. The Henderson case was eating away at him from within. In 30 years of career, he had never experienced such an unsolved case. By 1985, the Henderson case began becoming a cold file. Active investigation was officially halted. The file was archived. Even when Police Chief Morrison retired, he continued keeping the Henderson file on his desk. "I'll solve it someday," he would say. But he never did. Years passed. Cedar Falls tried to forget the Henderson family, but couldn't completely succeed. Every Christmas season, the story came back to the agenda. The local Cedar Falls Gazette published a retrospective article each year. Henderson family, still missing after X years. Special prayers were said for the Henderson family every Christmas Eve at St. Matthew's Church. Pastor Cross had made remembering the family a tradition. He frequently mentioned them in his sermons, asking the congregation to pray for them. In the 1990s, the Henderson case began being discussed on internet forums. True crime enthusiasts developed theories. Had the family been taken into witness protection? Was it a CIA operation? UFO abduction? Theories multiplied, but none were based on facts. In 1995, Pastor Cross died of a heart attack. He took the secrets of the Henderson case with him, or so it was believed. In 1999, Cedar Falls' population reached 12,000. New families moved to town. Old stories began being forgotten. The Henderson case became legend. Elderly people told the story to newcomers. Young people listened like a ghost story. If Emma and Grace Henderson were alive, they would now be 23-year-old young women, perhaps college graduates, perhaps married. Mark and Linda would be in their 50s. But no one had seen them. Entering the 2000s, the the Henderson case was almost completely forgotten. It had become just a cold file occasionally mentioned on internet pages and true crime podcasts. Cedar Falls' new generation saw the story not as a real event, but as town folklore. By 2024, St. Matthew's Church was in serious need of restoration. Having received minimal maintenance for 41 years, the building had gradually fallen into disrepair. The roof leaked, windows had cracks, the heating system didn't work. New pastor Jennifer Walsh, together with the church board, launched a comprehensive restoration campaign. The goal was to restore the church to its original 1800s appearance while making it capable of meeting modern needs. The project required a $500,000 budget. The congregation organized fundraising campaigns and received support from local businesses. Morrison and Sons Construction took the construction job. This company was founded by Tom Morrison, son of former police chief Dan Morrison. Tom had heard dozens of stories about the Henderson case from his father, knowing the case's impact on his father. Working at St. Matthew's Church felt strange to him. This was where the Henderson family was last seen. Restoration work began in June 2024. In the first phase, the roof, windows, and exterior facade were renewed. In August, focus shifted to the interior. Old carpets were removed, pews were restored, walls were painted. In September, it was time for the altar area. While removing the wooden platform, workers found something unexpected. Tom Morrison discovered a metal door while dismantling the altar structure. The door was embedded in the ground, covered with wooden panels, made of heavy steel, rusted but solid. There was no writing or markings on it, only an old-style key lock was present. Morrison initially thought this might be a safe where church treasures were stored. He consulted church historian Elizabeth Clark. Clark examined the church archives but found no records mentioning such a room's existence. Morrison's curiosity increased. He called a professional locksmith to open the door. The key lock had accumulated rust over decades but could be opened with skillful work. Behind the door was a narrow but deep corridor. At the end of the corridor, stairs descended downward. When Tom Morrison descended with a powerful flashlight, the scene that greeted him left him astonished. The underground room was about 15 square meters, low-ceilinged but spacious. Metal shelves and filing cabinets lined the walls. In the center stood a large work desk with a leather-covered chair behind it. On the desk were files, notebooks, photographs, and audio cassettes. This wasn't just a storage room, it was an organized office. Someone had conducted systematic work here. Morrison began examining the files on the desk. A thick file labeled Henderson Family caught his eye. Opening it revealed photographs of Mark, Linda, Emma, and Grace. Family photos, school pictures, even secretly taken images. Inside the file were detailed notes about the Henderson family's daily routines, habits, and social circles. Mark's work schedule, Linda's class hours, the girls' school program. Everything had been meticulously recorded. The Henderson file wasn't alone. As Morrison examined the shelves, he found dozens of other family files. Johnson family, 1979. Williams family, 1981. Patterson family, 1982. Bradley family, 1983. All were families from Cedar Falls and surrounding towns. Morrison remembered some of the names. The Johnson family had disappeared in 1979, supposedly going on a family visit. The Williams family had similarly vanished. At the time, these events were viewed as independent cases. No one thought there was a connection between them. Each file was extremely detailed. Photographs of families, notes about daily habits, financial situations, social circles. There were even audio recordings related to the families. Morrison listened to one cassette. It was Mark Henderson's voice, sounding like a phone conversation. "Yes, Pastor. We'll be at church tonight. Linda's very excited. The children are getting impatient too." The recording was from Christmas Eve, the day the Henderson family disappeared. When Morrison opened the desk drawer, his hand trembled. Inside were the Henderson family's personal belongings: Mark's driver's license, Linda's teacher ID, Emma's school card, Grace's library card. None of these had been found in their home when the family disappeared. What were they doing here? Tom Morrison decided to inform the police. The current Cedar Falls police chief was now Sarah Chen, who had taken over after Dan Morrison's retirement. Chen came to the church with her team immediately after receiving Morrison's call. Upon seeing the secret room, she understood this wasn't just a missing persons case. This was organized crime, systematic planning-based operations. The FBI was immediately notified. Iowa Regional Director Special Agent Maria Gonzalez came to Cedar Falls with her team. Gonzalez had worked on cold cases for 20 years, solving the most complex serial crime files, but she had never seen such an organized, detailed archive. The secret room beneath St. Matthew's Church was the work of a systematic criminal organization. When the files were examined, the emerging picture would reveal the biggest secret in Cedar Falls history. Pastor William Cross wasn't just a clergyman. He was also the leader, coordinator, and chief planner of an organized kidnapping ring. According to Cross's files, at least 24 families had been kidnapped from Cedar Falls and surrounding towns between 1975 and 1994. The operation was conducted under the code name Noah's Ark. Cross used his church authority and clerical status to gain families' trust, systematically monitoring them, waiting for the right moment to abduct them. The Henderson family was the operation's final major victim. When Cross died in 1994, the ring disbanded and activities ended. The Henderson family's fate was also written in the files. According to handwritten records kept by Cross, the family was first taken to the secret room in the church basement when leaving the church on Christmas Eve. After being held there for several days, they were taken out of Iowa and transferred to a farm in Nebraska. After staying there for about a month, they were transported to Colorado. Cross's network had multiple facilities in Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, and New Mexico. Old farmhouses, abandoned miner barracks, isolated cabins in mountainous regions. The Henderson family was held at one of these facilities, then handed over to the ring's customers. The files also contained customer lists, wealthy couples who couldn't complete adoption procedures, organized crime groups involved in human trafficking, even requests from foreign countries. The FBI rapidly expanded the investigation. Other people in Cross's network were investigated. The ring's finance specialist was Robert Martinez, who worked at Cedar Falls Bank. The logistics coordinator was Michael Brown, owner of a local transportation company. Both had quietly left town after Cross's death, disappearing without a trace. The FBI searched for them too. At one of the old facilities found in Colorado, personal belongings of the Henderson family were discovered: Mark's watch, Linda's wedding ring, Emma's favorite doll, Grace's bicycle. The belongings proved the family had been held there for a period. However, the Henderson family members themselves were not found. In Cross's files, it was written that the family had undergone final transfer in 1985. To which customer they were handed over, where they were taken wasn't clear. Only a completed transaction note existed. Cross had deliberately left some information incomplete, most likely for his own security. The solution to the Henderson case created an earthquake effect in Cedar Falls. The pastor they had trusted, respected, and believed in for 41 years turned out to be a monster targeting their children and families. The church congregation disbanded. Many people began questioning their religious beliefs. Pastor Jennifer Walsh resigned and moved to another state. St. Matthew's Church was closed. The building was put up for sale, but no one wanted to buy it. The situation was explained to the Henderson family's relatives by the FBI. Linda's sister, Margaret Thompson, was now 70 years old, having searched for her sister for 41 years. She said learning the truth was very painful, but knowing what happened provided some relief. For 41 years, I hoped to hear Linda's voice, Margaret said. Now knowing she suffered is terrible, but at least I know I hadn't gone crazy. Mark's family gave similar reactions. Everyone blamed themselves for trusting Cross. Other files in Cross's archive were also systematically examined. The Johnson family was kidnapped in 1979, held at a facility in Colorado for 2 months, then sold to Mexico. The Williams family was forced to work on a farm in Utah, with Mother Elizabeth dying from work conditions. The Patterson family was among the luckiest. They were found in Arizona during the FBI's 2024 investigation and gained their freedom after 45 years. The FBI investigation expanded nationwide. Operations began in all states where Cross's network extended. At old facilities in Colorado, remains of dozens of kidnapped people were found. Areas used as graves were discovered at the Wyoming farm. Underground cells were located in Utah. Cross's operation turned out to be much larger and more organized than estimated. Other surviving members of the ring were also caught. Robert Martinez had been living in Arizona under a false identity since 1995. Michael Brown had continued the transportation business in Texas, never arousing suspicion. When both were arrested by the FBI, they fully cooperated. They explained their roles in Cross's ring, how operations were conducted, which families were taken where. Clear information about the Henderson family's fate only emerged at this point. According to Martinez's testimony, the Henderson family was handed over to one of Cross's special customers in spring 1985. This customer was a wealthy couple from Canada who had fake adoption papers prepared. However, the families had an accident while being transported to Canada. In reality, this was a deliberate operation. The Henderson family was killed at the Colorado-Utah border in 1985. This horrible truth was privately explained to Margaret Thompson by FBI agents. Margaret cried, but also felt relieved. At least, now I know where they are, she said. Linda, Mark, and the girls are finally at peace. The FBI began comprehensive searches in the Colorado-Utah border region to find the Henderson family's remains. Cedar Falls built a memorial park on Main Street in honor of the Henderson family. At the park entrance, the names of the Henderson family and other victims of Cross's ring were written. Never to be forgotten was inscribed on the monument. Every Christmas Eve, townspeople gathered in the park, lighting candles for the missing families. The St. Matthew's Church building was demolished. Cedar Falls City Council decided to build a community center on the land. No one wanted to worship on that once sacred ground anymore. The church bells were donated to Iowa State University's museum. Tom Morrison said his father, Dan Morrison's inability to solve the Henderson case had bothered him throughout his life. My father trusted Cross, Tom said. His being a pastor, a clergyman, prevented my father from being suspicious. When my father died, he still felt guilty. The truth came out after my father had already died, but I believe his soul has now found peace. The Henderson case went down in records as one of the most complex and long-term cases in American true crime history. Cross's ring had kidnapped at least 100 families, killing dozens of people. The case's impact wasn't limited to Cedar Falls. Church security protocols were reviewed nationwide. Background checks for clergy were tightened. The Henderson family's story went down in history as the most painful example of how trust can be exploited, how even the most sacred places can become venues where evil can be hidden. Mark, Linda, Emma, and Grace Henderson disappeared on a Christmas Eve 41 years ago. The truth came out 41 years later. The family couldn't be found, but their memory, the search for justice, and the struggle to reach truth will live forever. Cedar Falls is no longer the innocent town it once was. People are more cautious, more suspicious toward each other. Christmas celebrations no longer pass as joyfully as before. But the Henderson family wasn't forgotten. Their story will continue to be passed on to future generations, told as a lesson to prevent similar tragedies. The Henderson family is missing, but their legacy lives on. The fight against Cross's ring continues. The FBI is still searching for missing persons, finding survivors, trying to ensure justice. The Henderson family's pain wasn't in vain. Thanks to them, other families were saved, other children returned home. Mark, Linda, Emma, and Grace Henderson's story may be finished, but their memory will live forever in Cedar Falls. Every candle lit at Christmas, every file opened, every missing person found is the Henderson family's legacy. They died, but truth lives, justice prevails. The Henderson family case remains as a story that Cedar Falls and America can never forget in history.